Washington Post reports that the House yesterday passed the so-called right to try legislation. This is a version, in fact, the same version that passed the Senate in August. The House was trying to fashion another version of this bill that wouldn't be so incredibly irresponsible, if you could believe it, and destructive of, I mean, it gives you a sense of just how much money the pharmaceutical industry pours into the Senate, even relative to the House. Now, ostensibly, it sounds like maybe it's a good idea, right? I mean, legislation that would allow people with life-threatening illnesses to bypass the Food and Drug Administration to obtain experimental medications. However, and this is a bill that was championed by Ron Johnson of Wisconsin. When you start to sort of like hear what's going on here, it becomes even that much more problematic. Right now, there are two options for patients who are seeking experimental medications. One is enroll in clinical trials, assuming they're eligible, or participating in the FDA's expanded access program. The agency has said that it approves almost all such requests to that program. So there already exists a mechanism, right? However, with this new bill, drug manufacturers wouldn't have to go through the FDA at all. They would have to report so-called adverse events. In other words, things that went really wrong, including premature deaths only once a year, and the bar in which what constitutes adverse events, not just in terms of like people's premature deaths, but the bar in terms of causality is weakened. So the agency would also be restricted in how it could use that information when it's considering the experimental treatments for approval. So in other words, we reported that we had some premature deaths, but you can't necessarily look at that when we're looking for approval. So this is really basically a way to undercut the FDA. Frank Pallone, the ranking Democrat on the House Energy Commerce Committee, basically said this is just going to allow fly-by-night physicians and clinics the opportunity to peddle false hope and ineffective drugs to desperate patients. But it's also the case that every major patient group overwhelmingly opposes this measure. So this is sort of like one of those nice-sounding but obvious attempts to destroy our regulatory structure and for pharmaceutical companies to make another buck.